Welcome to the Geometry Overview video. In this video, I just want to give you the scope of what the geometry course looks like. Before we get started, let me mention this book right here, Elements of Geometry, by a man named Euclid. This book was written about 300 years before Jesus Christ, okay? 300 years before Jesus came to earth here, 300 BC. And what's interesting is that in this book, you will see they have the Greek version, because Euclid was that was his background. You have Greek and you have English side by side. I don't know many people who have read this book in high school. If you're reading this book and you're a high schooler, you're going to go far in life. That's guaranteed because nobody does that, right? So that means that, of course, you're doing other things in your life that will get you far in life. But I'm not saying you have to read this, but I'm just trying to say this book is part of what is the foundation for some of the geometry textbooks that we're using today. And right from the first part of the book, which the book itself is basically broken into about 13 other books, or 13 books. It's called book. You have book 1, 2, 3, all the way to book 13. But in the beginning of the book, right away, the first thing it says is a point is that of which there is no part. That's the first thing it says. A point is that which of there is no. A point is that which of which there is no part. And a line is a length without breadth. That's what it starts with right away. Well, here's what's interesting. In the textbook that you will see for geometry, a lot of geometry textbooks, this is an example of a geometry textbook here. If you go to the first chapter, one of the first things they talk about is points, lines, and planes, right? This particular one starts with sets and set statements, but a lot of them will go to points, lines, and planes. It doesn't take too long before you get into discussing points, lines, and planes in many textbooks. There is a geometry handbook website that I've given to some of my students, and in that document you will see that it starts out right away with points, lines, and planes. So let's just talk about that for a little bit, and then actually I'll give you a scope of the whole course, and that will be it for today. So a point, right? You think of a point, and that's a point, right? You think of a line, that's a line, right? No beginning, no end. And then you think of a plane, in a sense, that's a plane there. By the way, a line has an infinite number of points. A plane has an infinite number of lines. That's part of what you'll find as you study this. But it's interesting because points, lines, and planes are usually called undefined terms. I repeat, they're called undefined terms. And from them, we build the basis for many other things in mathematics. So geometry as a whole will help you in learning how to reason better. If you understand logic, which is part of what you will learn in geometry, a lot of proofs, then your reasoning faculties will be strengthened. And that's something we need definitely today. We need to learn how to use our logical thinking faculty to engage with different conversations in society. And whatever conversations we're getting into with people, let's try to do it in love. Because I know there's a lot of intensity sometimes, especially when you're having dialogue online. But when you meet someone in person, try and have those deep conversations in person. And use some of these principles of logic that you're going to learn from geometry and as you move through the course. So we have points, we have lines, we have a few other things that I want to mention before we do the overview. There's a line segment, but a line segment, notice that with a line segment, it has a beginning and an end, right? So that's a line segment. And then there's something called a ray. A ray has one endpoint. So this is a plane, right? That's a plane, this is a line, and this is a point. Okay? So those are some of the things to keep in mind. Points, lines, and planes, segments, and rays. You'll see where all this comes together in a little bit. Another thing that we discuss in geometry is we talk about collinear points. That's simply points that lie on the same line. So collinear points are points that lie on the same line are called collinear. So think of it as when somebody's something, it's like they're side by side. There's coplanar points, and these are points that lie on the same plane. Very important to know the difference there. And so there's an overview in the Geometry Handbook document that you can find online, and it goes over different elements of geometry. But let me do this before we wrap up for today. In a typical geometry textbook, like the one I'm holding here, there's about 10 chapters, right? Maybe 10 to 12 chapters. And here's what you're going to observe in geometry. In geometry, you're going to learn the following. First, you're going to learn about points, lines, and planes, as I mentioned. Second of all, you're going to be learning about parallel lines and the relationship that exists between two parallel lines. If two lines are parallel, they create relationships when you draw a transversal. What do I mean by this? So let's look at it this way. If you have two lines that are parallel, so let's look at two lines. This is one line and this is another line. When you say two things are parallel, that means they will never meet. They keep going in, right? They never meet. Two parallel lines. But if you draw a transversal, it cuts across like that. That's called a transversal. So the moment you draw a transversal, then it creates a situation where now we have all these angles, right? These are all angles. And so we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, right? If I could label them with those letters, that means these angles have relationships to one another, all of them. A has a relationship to D. They're actually equal, right? This is just me introducing this parallel lines idea. But A is equal to D, and B is equal to C. E is equal to H, and G is equal to F, and so on and so forth. So parallel lines, right, they have, when you have a transversal that is drawn between the two of them, you have a relationship that begins to exist. So in geometry, you're going to learn about parallel lines and transversals. You're going to learn about triangles, right, the different types of triangles and the different relationships between the angles of the triangles. You're going to learn about quadrilaterals, your rectangles, squares, rhombuses, rhombi, sorry. You're going to be learning about that, right? You're going to be learning about quadrilaterals. You're going to be learning about similar triangles, right? You're going to be learning about circles, areas of polygons and circles. So notice that the area of a circle or the area of a certain shape, those are things that you learn in geometry. And it's all about using the formula for those ones. Just knowing what the right formulas are and using them appropriately. Surfaces and solids. You're going to learn about volume and surface area, which again involves using formulas. And then you're going to learn about analytical geometry and graphing. We talk about the rectangular coordinate system. So we're talking about the xy plane, y is equal to mx plus b, which you might have done in algebra. You should have done in algebra 1, but you're going to be reviewing that in algebra 2 again. In geometry. And then you're going to sometimes go into trigonometry, sine, cosine, and tangent. Those are some of the topics that you will learn in geometry. In the other videos we're going to make in this series, we'll do more examples and we'll discuss what geometry is about. So make sure you have your notebook, write the date, and then just look at that handbook. Look at some of those terms. Feel free to start reading that handbook, and it'll help you prepare as we look at more in geometry. Thank you for your time. We will have another video that covers more material shortly. Take care and have a good day.